Resident Evil is one of the biggest and most successful horror game series of all time. Probably, I'm not fact-checking that myself, it sounds right. As with most long-running series, there's good and bad, and this video will show that as we go through the last 15 years or so of Resident Evil and look at the rarest trophy in every single Resident Evil game that has trophies. First though, a few ground rules. First, when a game is on multiple consoles, i.e. PS4 and 5, I will look at the one with more players on trophy websites such as PSN profiles. Second, PSN only shows one decimal place for rarity, and so some rarest are tied according to PSN, so when that happens, I will once again look at relevant trophy sites' track percentage to break the ties so we have one definitive rarest per game. Third, the order of the list is the order in which games got trophies, so don't be surprised when Resi 1 is in the middle of the list. Fourth, I haven't personally got every single one of these, so if there's some information that's slightly wrong, feel free to correct me. Politely though. With all that said, let's get into this, starting with Resident Evil 5. Eye of the Tiger, 0.5%. This trophy is part of Resident Evil 5's Versus mode. I'll put my hands up here, I had no idea this game had a Versus mode. For this trophy, you need to win 30 games of Survivors. Fun fact, I think the devs knew people didn't want to play this mode because when the game was re-released for the PS4, they lowered the requirement from 30 down to 15 for this and other similar trophies. Good thing about this is that for this trophy, you can boost it easily, only needing one other player to start a match. This is good as this game is yonks old, so getting it without boosting is incredibly unlikely. Not much to say on it though, just win some matches and you'll get it. Resident Evil 4. A Heart of Steel, 8.3%. This is the original Resident Evil 4, but I'm sure you already knew that because you're an intelligent person who is definitely subscribed to the channel. OG Resi 4 is pretty generous with its trophies. You don't need to worry about rankings or anything like that. For this trophy, you need to beat the game on Professional. How this differs from normal is, by my understanding, normal has adaptive difficulty, so if you play bad, the game gets easier, while professional is always as hard as it can be. So by that logic, theoretically, if you play really well on normal, professional won't be any harder. While most advice boils down to just being good, there are some things you can do to make it easier. First up, do this trophy last so you already have the knight armor for Ashley and so you won't need to worry about her anymore. Other than that, optimize healing so you don't run out of herbs, and save ammo where you can. Resident Evil Code Veronica X. Battlemaster, 2.3%. Do you say the X? I have no idea. I'll get this out of the way quick. The PS4 version of the game has more trophies than the PS3 version. However, all the trophies in the PS3 version are also in the PS4 version. And thankfully the rarest is present and the same in both versions. This trophy needs you to unlock the linear launcher from battle mode. You do this by A-ranking the mode with each of the 5 characters in it. This mode is somewhat similar to Mercenaries where you need to clear all the enemies off the map. Your ranking is determined by the time it takes you to do this. Each character has their own loadouts and requirements that you can look up yourself if you need to. The neat thing is that the weapons have infinite ammo, which is one extra thing you don't need to worry about. The 5th character, Wesker, does give you a much longer time limit than all the others, like a lot more. Wesker gives you an hour while the second longest gives you 10 minutes. The reason for this is likely that Wesker just has a knife. To make this easier though, you should try and get the Magnum from the jackpot machine to make his final boss much easier. But if you play well, an hour is more than enough time. You can probably even afford to be slightly cautious. I saw videos that were doing it in like 20 minutes. Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Delivery Specialist, 0.6%. Fun fact, this was actually my first Resident Evil game, so I have a bit of bias towards it despite it being, you know. I think it's the best of the more multiplayer focused Resi games. That's not massive praise, but it is praise. For this trophy, you need to personally deliver all 5 samples in the Biohazard game mode on the Dispatch map. I assume this is a DLC map because it's a DLC trophy. The game mode is basically capture the flag. First team to retrieve 5 samples wins, so for this trophy, you need to be the one retrieving all the samples to win the game. This is obviously a lot easier, okay it's basically free, if you can get a group of people to boost this with. I assume getting this naturally nowadays is very unlikely considering how old this game is. I don't really have much more to say on it, it's pretty self-explanatory. Resident Evil The Umbrella Chronicles Zombie Smackdown, 1.1%. I'ma be real with you, I had never heard of this game or the next one coming up before starting this video. It seems to be a light gun game, you know, like an on-rail shooter. Originally this was on the Wii, which after looking at it, yeah, I can totally see it. This trophy needs you to complete the special stage. The way this seems to work is each wave has 2 phases. Your first phase you need to shoot enemies as they appear, but they will not attack you. Phase 2, every enemy that you didn't defeat in that wave charges at you through the door. So if you missed a lot of enemies in the first phase, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. There are 10 waves and the complete level lasts about 7 minutes. There's not a lot to say on it though. It might be hard, but there's no tips and tricks to make it easier other than focus on it and have good reaction time, I guess. Resident Evil: The Dark Side Chronicles Archive Collector 0.8%. The second of these light gun games, this trophy needs you to get all the archive collectibles in the game. This consists of files, costumes, and titles. Files are hidden throughout the levels as well as being awarded for completing stages on different difficulties and with S ranks. I didn't check through the whole list, but S ranking every stage on the hardest difficulty is almost certainly required. Costumes are also for beating certain levels on certain difficulties with certain ranks. Take a shot every time I say the word certain. Don't actually do that though. Titles are effectively just in-game achievements. Not going to go over all of them because there's 62 of these things. Some to highlight though are fully upgrading all weapons, killing an amount of enemies, beating the game within 5 hours, and beating every stage without dying. There are more obviously, like a lot more, but those are the ones that stuck out to me when I was looking through the list quick. Another potential reason for this trophy being the rarest is that I did see a few posts about the trophy being glitched. I can't verify that myself, but the idea of going through 50-60 hours of an on-rail shooter and then the reward essentially being bugged does not sound fun to me. Resident Evil 6. Civilian casualties 0.2%. This is part of, again, a PvP mode which I did not know existed. This is in Siege mode for defeating the BSAA 100 times. What this means is that when playing as the creature team, you must defeat the AI-controlled BSAA agent 100 times. Player kills are not counted towards this. You can boost this with only one other player, which is good, as at this point boosting is the only way you're likely to get this. The only hiccup is that friendly and enemy AI might get in the way of you getting the kill, but overall there's not much to worry about. It's another one that will likely take a while, but it is really simple to explain, which means this section will be shorter. Though I'm sure people would rather I not remind them of Resi 6 as much, which, fair enough, we'll move on. Resident Evil Revelations. Bonus Demigod 3.2%. This trophy is to do with the raid mode, which I actually did know existed despite never playing it myself. For this trophy you need to get 150 bonuses across the whole mode. There are 4 per level and there's 62 levels for a grand total of 248 potential bonuses, so quite a bit of leeway. The bonuses are the same for every level. They are 4, defeating all enemies, beating the stage at a lower level than recommended, taking no damage, and then the 4th is for getting all 3 of these in one go. Probably a good idea to try and get all 4 on easier difficulties so you don't have to try as hard to no damage the harder ones. For reading online though, this mode takes an age to do and it is also designed to be done in co-op. It is doable solo, but people generally seem to agree that it's a lot better with other people. I don't know how alive the game is now, I assume not very, but I'm sure you could find someone willing to help if you look in the right places. Resident Evil. Ghost of a Chance. 1.6%. This trophy is for clearing invisible enemy mode. You'll never guess what this mode does. In all seriousness, this is the kind of quirky bonus mode that I like to see. You don't really see it much anymore. Get it? Don't see it anymore because they're invisible? Please like and subscribe. Sidestepping that joke, this trophy is not as bad as it may seem at first glance. You can play on the easiest difficulty and run past the vast majority of the enemies. Most people seem to agree that Chris is the easier one to do, but there is nothing stopping you from doing it as Jill. Avoid anything extra that might make the game longer. What I mean specifically is not doing the requirements to trigger the second tyrant fight on the helipad. That is just an extra thing that you can avoid. Considering the requirement to unlock this mode is clearing real survival mode all the main game as both characters on at least normal, being able to do this on the easiest difficulty is comparatively easier. If all the modes were unlocked from the start, I bet this wouldn't be the rarest. Also, apparently enemies still show up in mirrors. I don't know if that's helpful at any point, but I think it's neat and cool. Resident Evil Revelations 2. I'm not leaving without my medal, 0.2%. Each of the 4 episodes in this game gives you medals for doing extra objectives, and this trophy is for getting all of them in episode 4. You don't need to do them all in one run though, and can do them all on the easiest difficulty. Each of the 2 sections has 10 medals each for a grand total of 20. Now, I'm not going to list all of them, but they are mostly miscellaneous tasks. A few of these include clear the Claire section with 100% accuracy, there's barely any enemies so it's not as hard as it may seem, clear with 0 retries, hit enemies with 15 bricks, and so on. Honestly, this all seems fairly straightforward, so I feel like I must be missing something for this to be so rare. Answers on a postcard, please. The one that people seem to agree is the most difficult is for defeating Alex without getting hit as Barry. Main takeaway for me is that if the AI gets hits, that voids the medal, which is always fun, love relying on the AI. Also, people were saying there's less to do in the fight on the bad ending route, so I guess do that as well. Looking through it though, that is the only one of the 20 medals that people were complaining about, which leads me to believe that everything else is tickety-boo, especially if you're willing to look up guides for item locations and whatnot. Resident Evil 0. Who Needs Partners? 2.7%. This trophy revolves around the Leech Hunter minigame unlocked after beating the main game. How this mode works is that there's 100 leeches around the map, 50 blue and 50 green, and for this trophy you need to get all of only one of them and none of the other one. Each character can only pick up one colour, Rebecca green and Billy blue. The placements around the map are not the same every time. There are a handful of different layouts, and so if you're using guides, you got to ensure it's matching your game. From reading various strategies online, the general consensus seems to be using Billy to defeat all the enemies and using Rebecca to carry green leeches. Some people say it's actually best to kill all the enemies before collecting any leeches, as they apparently don't respawn until you collect 90, which for this achievement you won't be doing. That's probably the strategy I would go for when I get round to this, as once you've defeated enemies you wouldn't need to worry about storage space anymore. One last thing to note though is that you have to leave via the front door and end the minigame for the trophy to pop. It's not as soon as you collect the last one, which means you can't stack it with other trophies in this mode. Umbrella Corps. You can't touch this, 0.4%. I really want to visit the alternate timeline where Umbrella Corps becomes an incredibly successful esport and is played for millions of dollars worth of cash prizes to this day. For this trophy, you need to complete all the U trials. Slightly off topic, but my brother plays a lot of Call of Duty, and when I asked him, he said that these are basically like unlocking gun camos in that game, so take that for what you will. They're basically challenges with numbers that are way too big and are probably designed to take years of play. For example, get 1,000 kills, play 500 matches, getting each of the different MVP types 50 times each, 60 melee kills, and winning a match within 60 seconds 100 times. That is nowhere near all of them, but it illustrates the point well enough. Let's be real, you're not going for all this nowadays, but if you are, you're almost certainly boosting it. I don't imagine this game has much of an active player base. I don't think it ever did, but nowadays it certainly does not. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. King of the Swamp, 0.2%. As with most of the hard trophies in this game, this comes from one of the DLCs, specifically End of Zoe. For this trophy, you need to beat said DLC on the Joe Must Die difficulty. This difficulty is no joke, as you'd expect. Enemies are a lot stronger, but more notable to me anyway is the plethora of added traps littered throughout the DLC. There's less saves throughout, which has become typical of these harder difficulties. Stealth is a much bigger emphasis here than on easier difficulties. You absolutely should have the gauntlet from clearing earlier difficulties for this. Don't try it without it. Also make sure to save throwables for when they're absolutely needed, as there's far less items than on easier difficulties. This almost becomes more of a puzzle game as you learn how to avoid being seen so you can stealth kill enemies and avoid traps due to just how quick you die in a straight up fight. Especially learn where you can go for the crocodiles. Dying to them never feels good. You also need to actually learn the boss's patterns as opposed to just powering through them. If you're the type that doesn't mind some help, it's absolutely worth playing along with a video guide. Chances are it will still take you multiple tries anyway, even with something perfect to copy from. Resi 7's DLC is full of really hard trophies, and this is a worthy rarest among them. Resident Evil 2. Hell of a Sheriff. 1.5%. This trophy is for clearing the No Way Out Ghost Survivors mode. In this mode, you play as the sheriff in a horde survival mode in the gas station from the very start of the main game. It's framed as an endless horde survival mode, but that's actually untrue. Once you defeat 100 enemies, Leon will arrive and you as the sheriff guy will survive. Hooray! Killing 100 enemies though is no easy feat. You have very limited resources and have to make do with what you can scavenge from enemies. It is very easy to get surrounded, especially later on when the armoured, gas and palehead zombies start spawning in. Also though, some do have explosive canisters on their back that can be very useful for clearing a lot at once, but also can get you killed if you aren't careful. There's no trick to make this easier other than practicing. You gotta learn the rough spawns and often make sure enemies enter the store so that the drops aren't out of bounds. Like I said, practice. This took me hours and hours of attempts. Victory sure feels earned though. Resident Evil 3, Jill Valentine, 7.0%. Resident Evil 3 Remake is famously one of the remakes of all time. I still had fun with it though. For this trophy you need to clear the hardest difficulty in the game, Inferno, with an S rank. So what does that entail? Well, naturally enemies deal the most damage and are more aggressive obviously, but there's also no autosave as well as less typewriters and item boxes throughout. To get the S rank the requirements are beating the game in under 2 hours and saving less than 5 times. This might sound pretty difficult on paper, and if you go in as default Jill, it probably is. However, this game makes it incredibly easy to get the infinite rocket launcher by farming kills on easier difficulties. The infinite rocket launcher makes most of Inferno very easy, and if you want a challenge at all, you won't use it, but there's nothing stopping you from using it for this trophy. You can actually even spend real money to unlock it and everything else in the shop, which is likely another reason that this trophy is so common compared to most others on this list. Even with the infinite rocket launcher though, the final boss is still very difficult, as dodging is more important than shooting, so maybe get the dodge book as well. Basically, if you get hit, you get chained and die without being able to get out of it. Make sure you have at least one save for this final boss because it is quite easily the hardest part of the run. I would say I spent at least half of my time trying this trophy on this final boss. Resident Evil Resistance. Weird flex, but okay, 0.7%. Another one of the Capcom trying to make Resident Evil an online games. Quick in the comments, rank all the online Resi games from worst to best. That's a fun exercise. For this trophy you need to play as the most well-known Resident Evil character, Daniel, and you need to use 4 creature cards that cost 4 or more energy in a row. I've not played this game, but from reading this doesn't seem too bad. Apparently you can use his default deck, as once you get to area 3 you get a 5 cost card, so if you have the right cards you can just use them provided you have enough energy. You can also use a custom deck and add the liquor card or clone card, but from what I can tell you need to level other characters to unlock that. I also naturally assume this game is firmly dead, but if you manage to get a group together you could presumably boost this as well as all the other trophies in the game fairly easily. Resident Evil Village, Supreme Team, 1.2%. This trophy comes to us from the Shadow of Rose DLC, needing you to beat it on the hardest difficulty, Hardcore. Now while this is no slouch, unlike a lot of the other hardest difficulties, this one is very generous with autosaves, meaning that deaths are not as big a loss as other games. As such, the advice is fairly generic. Save your ammo where possible, especially for the shotgun. Dodge enemies instead of fighting where you can, and learn the boss's patterns. I guess also make sure you clear out rooms of useful items before moving on to make your life easier. I guess another thing to mention is that this difficulty is actually unlocked from the start, which again is different to most of the hardest difficulties. Personally, I found this one the easiest of all the hardest difficulties I've done in this series, to where I don't really have anything specific to say on it. Resident Evil Reverse, Raccoon City Survival Squad, 1.2%. The latest attempt at a multiplayer Resident Evil game, and it's gone pretty much the same as every other attempt. At time of recording, they've literally just announced that the servers are going to be shutting down in June, so if you want to get these trophies, hurry up and do it, yeah? For this trophy specifically, you need to win a single match as each of the original 6 characters in the game, that being Chris, Jill, Leon, Claire, Ada, and Hunk. It's a free-for-all game, and once you die you become a creature from Resident Evil's history and can still try to get points by defeating humans before respawning as a human yourself. Now I would assume this would be a lot harder nowadays than when the game was populated, but with the game shutting down soon, it's possible that more people might flock to it to try and get these. From my experience though, the people who I ran into playing this were either complete newbies who just booted up the game for the first time, or people who have been playing it for ages and are super OP. Due to, at the time, there being so few people playing, the balancing was awful. If you get put in a match with a high-level, all-upgrades player, you might as well just quit. You aren't gonna win. You could theoretically try and boost this, but there's not a lot specifically to talk about. You just need to win games. Hopefully we don't get another Resident Evil multiplayer PvP game, but I would bet anything that they try it again. Resident Evil 4. Ada the S plus Pi, 2.2%. I know it's a pun on spy, but I didn't know how to say it out loud. You know, in hindsight, I should have had OG Resi 4 first on the list, so we could have had a full circle moment here at the end. This trophy is in the Separate Ways DLC, for beating it on Professional, the hardest difficulty, with an S+ rank. To get that rank, you need to beat it in under 2.5 hours while also using less than 10 saves. At this point in the video, I'll just be repeating the same advice I've given throughout, so instead I will just say that you can make this easier by unlocking the Chicago Sweeper, which has infinite ammo which you can get by A-ranking Professional difficulty beforehand. You do have to play a little bit to get enough for the weapon ticket to get it though, or you can once again use real money to get the ticket early if you are so inclined. This doesn't make it as free as say the rocket launchers do in Resident Evil 2 and 3, but it certainly is an advantage. As with all of these trophies though, there are more in-depth guides online for specific sections that you might be struggling with. And that's the video. How many of these do you have? I have a few of these, but nowhere near as much as I'd like. I really need to play more of these games. Let me know how many of these you have in the comments and tell me your favourite game to 100%. We'll do that too, why not? And while you're down there, why not subscribe? It's free, helps me out, and gives you easier access to my videos, both old and new. They're all trophy related, it's a fun time. In fact, I've done this same video format for some other series, so check them out if you'd like. Thank you for watching this video to the end. For now though, I'm off, hunt them tropes, and I'll see you next time.